It is now my pleasure to welcome Mark Buccella. Mark is a strategic problem design thinker. Oh, Mark, we got an echo. Human-centered design expert. He's worked in digital product and service for over 25 years, leading projects in financial services, healthcare, higher education, energy and utilities, and other industries. He works as a researcher and strategist, applying design thinking methods to help teams discover insights about customer needs, identify opportunities for innovation, and ideate on potential solutions. He's worked for companies such as Honeywell, United Healthcare, National Grid, Oracle, General Mills, Thrive and E-Trade, Room and Board, American Public Media, the McKnight Foundation, Pentair, and many more. So please welcome Mark for the Once and Future of Workshops, Why Interdisciplinary Collaborative Design is Relevant in a Post-Pandemic AI-emergent World. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Nora. Thanks for having me, and thanks for that nice intro. A lot of company names. When Nora and I were talking about my topic, and we settled on this idea of where we've been and where we're going with workshops, it made me think of the T.H. White novel about the Arthurian legend called The Once and Future King. And it got me thinking about the character Merlin in those stories, who's living backwards through time as he's guiding young Arthur, which is kind of how I feel sometimes doing human-centered design in the constantly changing world of technology. So for this talk, you can sort of think of me as that wizened old gray hair guy living backwards through time, just here to share a little perspective with you. And in case you want to know a little bit more about who I am and why you might care what I think, as Nora said, I've been doing digital product design for a long time. And during that time, I've had about a dozen job titles, and you can see a few of them here. And for my fellow design nerds out there, the first version of Photoshop I ever used was version 4, back when they still numbered it. And that was before Photoshop had layers. So if you wanted to mask something out, you had to create your own alpha channel. Pretty crazy, right? So the topic is workshops, and I think I can safely say that workshops saved me. I first started doing workshops with clients and teams back in the mid-aughts. And back then, I was mostly doing interaction design for web applications and doing lots and lots and lots of wireframes and lots of rounds of feedback and many, many iterations. And it was just all a bit of a drag, to be honest. Then I discovered Leah Bewley and her design studio method, where she would have teams do collaborative sketching early in the process with quick iterations based on feedback before making higher fidelity prototypes. And it was a real revelation for me. It seems obvious now, but at the time it was so freeing to realize things didn't have to be perfect right out of the gate. By including non-designers directly in the process from the get-go, you could build alignment, work through multiple approaches, and make those additional iterations more valuable. And I really appreciated the show don't tell way of eliciting input. It didn't just save hours wireframing, it also helped clarify the needs of the humans we were trying to serve and the actual problem to be solved. And it got the team aligned before any final designs were done or any code was written. And shortly after that, the firm I worked for, shout out to B-Swing in Minneapolis, paid to send me to a 3-day design thinking bootcamp put on by the Stanford D School. And that was really it for me. Just like Amber, I was hooked. And from then on, I didn't want to work any other way. And design thinking methods have really been the foundation of how I approach work since then. And so I've grown to really appreciate the aspects of good collaborative workshops and the things that I think make them valuable. I think when a workshop's done right, they're interdisciplinary. They bring together people from different roles and perspectives to collaborate on tough problems. They're experimental. They create an environment where people are willing to break out of their roles and embrace experimentation. They're validating, providing opportunities to get rapid feedback and iterate on ideas. And they're aligning. They enable teams to bridge gaps in understanding and level sets on problems and potential solutions. But with all the changes we've experienced in the last several years, workshops have changed a lot as well. They've become less analog and more digital. They've become generally less in person and more remote. And I think with some of these changes, they've become a bit less rigorous and they have become a little bit more pro forma. And I'm not here to say all these changes have been bad for design collaboration. I actually think a lot of these have been positive changes, and I'll get into that. But generally, I'm of the opinion that the more things change, the more they stay the same, or at least maybe they should. And I'm very open to other thoughts on this, but I think as long as we work to maintain those four qualities of a good design collaboration, design workshops can still be valuable, relevant, and useful. So I want to share a perspective with you on where the future of collaborative design should or might go. But to do that, I think we need to ground ourselves in the state of things today. And before that, we're going to go look back at where this practice of design collaboration kind of began. So back in the 19th century, the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris was the place to learn art and architecture. The main instructional format there was called a design charrette. And if any of you studied any kind of design school, you may have participated in your share of charrettes. Students would work on their design assignments intensively, leading up to a group review with instructors. When the deadline came, an attendant would come through the studio with a big cart, called a charrette in French, to collect the students' work. And sometimes they would even ride on the cart so they could add finishing touches before the final presentation. So this format of rapid ideation followed by group discussion and feedback continue to be the core of collaboration in architecture, graphic design, and other disciplines into the 20th century. In the 70s, it started to be adopted by urban planners as a way to enroll stakeholders outside of the design team directly in the creative process. And along the way, engineers introduced the idea of a place where you could tinker and make to help you figure things out, which eventually was applied to the act of people getting together to do the same thing. And I'm fascinated by these two definitions of workshop and this transition from place to a way of collaborating and problem solving. And it became, as we all know, a central aspect of this new way of collaborating. As human-centered design started to spread to product design and software design and the business world in general, the idea of collaborating with non-designers early in the process did too. And as we all know, that's where we got design thinking. And in the last few decades, it's really become the norm for how any team engages in solving challenging problems for humans. In the 80s and 90s, practitioners combined the engineering method of innovation based on understanding user needs with designerly practices from architecture and product design and the needs of modern businesses, which require cross-team alignment and collaboration. And by including non-designers, they made the traditional craft of design just one part of the process. And I think they actually created a kind of a new metacraft that can be learned and practiced by people from all disciplines and backgrounds. And this craft of collaboration continues to adapt and evolve with the needs of organizations and the people that they serve, which brings us to where we are today. As different organizations and companies have applied these ideas, put their own spin on them, new names and methods have emerged, and all these approaches are valuable depending on the need and the context. But whatever they're called and whoever's doing it, when they work, I think it's because they still maintain these qualities that make collaborative design, collaborative craft beneficial. But Something happened a few years ago that's had a really big impact on everything we do and on all of us, especially how we work and collaborate. Who remembers what they were doing mid-March of 2020? I was helping kick off a project with the Clean client, discussing the plan for the workshop they were going to have in a few weeks. And I was walking back to my car. I checked my email and saw the notice that the office was closed until further notice. We spent the next 3 days on Zoom with the client trying to figure out what we were going to do. And in the end, we did what we all did back then. We adapted. We did the whole workshop remotely. And since then, I've facilitated dozens of remote workshops. And I think, like many changes from the pandemic era, there are good and bad things about doing workshops online. So first, the good stuff. I think digital tools like Miro can be more flexible and portable. A digital whiteboard is always available wherever you are, which is great for dispersed teams. They can return to them over and over, export them, share them, continue to iterate, etc. And online workshops are obviously more accessible. No need to get on a plane or commute to an office. And they're great for people who are new to these methods. A Miro board and a Zoom call, I think, can have kind of a training wheels effect. It can be less intimidating than in person. And the methods can all be set up in advance to make them easier to follow. For me, one of the biggest upsides of the pandemic was having more opportunities to introduce people to these methods. But obviously there's downsides too. I think digital tools can sometimes create a false sense of accomplishment. It can be easy for a team to feel like they've done something after they've been shuffling digital sticky notes around for an hour. They can feel a little gamified, and I think that can impact and hurt rigor. They're also inherently high fidelity. You can write War and Peace in a digital sticky note. This can be a challenge for teams trying to get early feedback, because the earlier you are in the process, the less you want to be investing time and fidelity. And they have a different pace and energy. Since Zoom is so tiring, it isn't practical to ask people to collaborate intensely all day for several days in a row. You need to break it into smaller chunks over days. But that comes at a loss of energy and momentum, which can really dull the impact. So given all that, where are things headed and what should we do? Because we've reached the limit of the impact technology can have on collaborative design, right? I mean, thankfully, there aren't any more radical technologies coming along, changing how we collaborate, right? In case you've missed my subtlety here, this is my obligatory segue to talking about generative AI. So initially, thinking about generative AI, I felt adversarial toward the robots. But my attitude is starting to shift, and I'm starting to come around. There's lots of ways AI can save us from some of the tedious parts of design collaboration. Here's a couple examples. So on the left side, I asked ChatGPT to give me a learning agenda for 3 weeks of research leading up to a workshop. And on the right, I asked for an agenda for a 2-day workshop for a digital product team. And I have to say, as starting points, these are pretty good. This took less time than it would have taken me to just find my last good example of either of these. And they're great first drafts. And when it comes to finding patterns in all kinds of data, the robots obviously win here too. This is ChatGPT analyzing some qualitative user data I gave it from an actual workshop and finding themes and patterns. And in about a minute, it pretty much came up with the same themes that I did in an afternoon. And yes, the robots can even do our sketching and storyboarding for us. But this is where I think the danger starts to lie. I recognize that AI is just another tool for making visual design stimulus. But I think when you spend an hour or so with DALL-E to crank out a storyboard, you miss out on the chance to collaborate real time with other humans on your ideas. Because what's important here is the feedback on the ideas, not how pretty the storyboard is. AI can't give feedback because it's a long way from knowing the difference between good and bad. I think Ted Chiang articulated this pretty well in his New Yorker article a few weeks ago when he used the example of a professional photographer's ability to make choices in composition and exposure to create an image. He said it might not always be easy to articulate what the choices are, but when you compare an amateur's photos to a professional's, you can see the difference. AI can't make those choices yet. And for that matter, it isn't capable of empathizing with human needs. And because of that, it can't truly collaborate with us on human-centered problems. But the operative word is yet. The day is probably soon coming where we will find ourselves collaborating in real time with teams of humans and machines. In fact, it's probably already here. So where does this leave us? Well, where are my Battlestar Galactica fans at out there? My nerd brain can't help but think of one of the themes of that show. All this has happened before, all this will happen again. Now, this change is new. The cycle of adapting to new technology never really ends. Ask me about the time I once facilitated a sketching workshop with a hybrid team in the pre-smartphone days using fax machines and a speakerphone. That was good times. But the tools and format of collaboration shouldn't be an impediment to getting the benefits from it. What's important is how we hang on to those fundamental qualities of good collaboration. So to that end, I humbly present some principles of design collaboration. And these are definitely a work in progress, and I'm really looking forward to feedback on these. But I hope they can be a guide for how to be good collaborative craftspeople going forward. So first, remove barriers to entry and make collaboration accessible. Don't let the format, in-person, remote, or hybrid, prevent people from participating. Turn that format to your advantage if it can help people get started. Enable and expect active participation. Ensuring the team is ready and knows what to expect. Create opportunities for everyone to participate. Harness diverse perspectives. Bring in voices from other disciplines and backgrounds. Value diversity and create a structure that allows everyone to be heard and understood. Prioritize learning over output. Worry less about what you make and more about what you're going to learn together. Be open to learning wherever it's coming from. If you aren't learning, you aren't really workshopping anything. Listen and learn from humans. Make sure it's not just you and the machines. Prioritize human-to-human connection and center the voices least often heard, especially those who are going to be most directly impacted by your work. Expect change and plan to improvise. Have a plan, but be ready to pivot. Stay open to new methods and tools. Lead the session, but if you're facilitating, let the session lead you too. And don't be afraid to play a little chess. Build empathy, create a safe place for authenticity. So build empathy inwardly as well as outwardly. Encourage people to embrace discomfort and make something and enable everyone to express their authentic selves. Leave room for possibility. You learn more when you value emergence over perfection. So keep it analog where you can and make something you can get feedback on. Know when to speed up and when to slow down. Going fast is great, but it isn't valuable in and of itself. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Use breaks in the action forced by format as time to accelerate other activities. And let humans and machines each do what they do best. Machines for speed, humans for making choices. You use AI to give you more options to help validate and find patterns faster, but when it's time to decide what direction to choose, let the humans do it until the machines are ready. Thanks, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Mark. And again, put any questions in the Q&A box. We have a few already. And Mark will answer them. So first from the Q&A, when do you know when you need to pivot, and how do you determine how you pivot?
That's a really good one. I think a lot of design thinking practices and methods, it's knowing answers to those kinds of questions that comes a lot from just getting reps. And the more you've been through the process, and the more you know kind of where you're heading in the process, and really focusing on what stage you are in design thinking, whether you're building empathy, or you're making a prototype, or you're ideating or defining the problem, like keeping that focus in mind is really the most important thing for knowing when to make those adjustments to your plan as you're on the fly. So if you have a plan, you're going to facilitate a session in a certain way, or you're going to do some research or ideation activity a certain way with the team. But in the fly, you're finding, we're not getting what we intended to get from this activity. Just don't be afraid to call an audible. Like, keep your focus on that goal, and then that's when you got to make a change.
That makes sense. I do have a request if you can go back a slide to share your best practices.
Okay.
Another one, in the virtual workshop world, what are your tactics to maintain momentum with needing to compensate for Zoom fatigue?
Yeah, this is a tough one. And I think, the teams I worked with in 2020, we learned this the hard way. Like, and it's a hard trade-off, but I think doing what you would normally do in person in a couple days, but do it over like 4 days or a week in shorter sessions, it really helps. And then using those gaps in between, that's kind of what I mean in here by know when to speed up, when to slow down. It's if you can use the gaps in between to do some of the follow-on work that you would normally do after a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, all day sessions. Normally then you'd spend like a week, trying to glean what you really learned out of it, and kind of parsing through all the ideas, etc. But if you break your session up, if it's a remote session, you do like 3-hour chunks every morning for a week or something. Then you spend the afternoons, going through your ideas, and then present back some distilled thoughts the next morning, or spend the afternoon actually doing some offline prototyping, and then bring something back to the team in the session the next morning. So I think there's other ways to, it's just a different pace when you're doing things online, and it's a different flow.
Yeah. Okay. In your experience in consulting and agency work, are clients getting more comfortable with design collaboration? Has it gotten easier to move people to play along, or are there objections just evolving?
Oh, I think it's definitely gotten easier. I mean, gone, I think, are the days where, we would come and go into a room and with a full of like business folks and software engineers, you would all be kind of like, okay, what do these jokers want to do? I mean, now it's more of an expectation that this is what we're going to be doing. I mean, design thinking has just become more of a known, people know what it is, or at least they think they know what it is. I think the challenge is to make it not be just ticking a box, like, oh, we did the workshop thing, great, now we're ready to move on to the next thing. So therein lies the challenge. I think the win is people want it. The challenge is they don't always know exactly what they're asking for.
Yeah. Another question, do you find, or do you have good strategies for what you leave people with when you're done with the collaboration session?
Yeah, so if it's a kind of a like consultant client or agency client well, even if it's an in-house thing, I think coming up with some quick follow-on, okay, this is what we heard, this is what we made, this is what we learned. And then sharing that with the team and taking a moment there to make sure people are aligned. And then even before you package that up, I mean, sometimes I'll often put together like a 5-slide deck, like just saying, hey, thanks so much. This was really valuable. This is what we did, just as a reminder. This is what came out of it, and this is what to expect next. So you can keep that momentum going. And so it doesn't become just like we did the design thinking theater thing for 2 days and now everybody just goes back to their lives. Like you keep it going.
Yeah. Okay. Do you ever have to tell a client that a workshop needs to be in person when they want a virtual one, or suggest virtual when they want an in-person workshop?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I was sort of hoping somebody would ask this. Um, it's tough. I wish I could be the person to say to a client, no, we have to do this in person, and people got to get on planes, and we got to get in the room, and I would much rather always do this in person from now on. As much as I really love Miro. I mean, I really think it's an amazing tool, and other tools that do similar things. But I just don't think we can be good partners as designers to teams if we're forcing that format, whatever it is, the preferred format. And I mean, even like I kind of alluded to, even pre-pandemic, it's always been a need. I mean, you're always going to have, even no matter how hard you try to say, we want everybody in the room, there's always going to be people who just can't get there. And so you're going to have to, I think hybrid is the way of the future. And I think the more things like, augmented reality become, or virtual reality spaces become better, maybe that's going to make things a little bit easier. But it's not, I've done workshops without pre the digital whiteboards with just 2 conference rooms and the cameras and the speaker phones and people holding up their laptop cameras so that the people in the other room can see what's on the wall. And I mean, just you got to do whatever you got to do to make it work, I think, is the bottom line.
It's good advice.